Hi, this is Geraldine Donaher, and I was just on talking with Kevin and Son and really had a wonderful conversation with a very uncomfortable topic of domestic sex trafficking of minors here in the United States. Please give it a listen so that we can have more people out there aware of this problem. Thank you.
Welcome to another episode of Talking with Kevin and Son, featuring the people you should know. Hi, my name is Kevin Macklemore. I am your show host. I'm a four-time published author, speaker, and as my friends call me, the Mindset Messenger. This episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Our mission is through the power of our story is to uplift your voice, inspire you, share stories and experiences and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is very simple, folks. We want to create hope. We want to help other people every single day. So whatever your objective, successful people, they create a framework around their day-to-day lives, and sometimes not only do they enhance theirs, but many times, like my guest today, they pour into others. This episode will explore the world of an unknown conversation that many of us try not to have, but it's a conversation we need to have. My guest, born in Philadelphia, she is one out of 13 children. Matter of fact, she is 11th out of 13. At the age of 19, she entered a convent. Because of her experiences in the convent, she penned her first book, Still. We'll talk about that, based on her experience and her struggles when she left the order. Today's guest is a distinguished global leader. She's an expert in the hardships of preteens and teens and what they're facing today. For the past 6 years of her life, our guest has researched domestic sex trafficking of minors here in the United States. Our guest has interviewed directors of safe house, social workers, lawyers, teen health advocates, psychologists, addiction medical people, tattoo artists, educators of survivors, and she is about to release her new book, YA. And we'll find out what YA is, her novel that shows preteens and teenagers that cohesive and explorative abuse that you can recognize through your friends and groups and also in your relationships. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest for today, Miss Geraldine Donaher, expert. Geraldine, how you doing?
Good afternoon. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. As my father said it, I'm one of 13 also, but it's two sets of twins in our family. You're the 11th of 13. So your father called that free babysitting?
We were always just a number, or he would get our names mixed up. Yes, I was raised by a lot of my older siblings. So my mom was the person who just managed everything.
All right, all right. So let's, you're born and raised in Philadelphia. All
Yes,
right,
yes. Lawndale section, right next to Longcrest, and Cheltenham was right behind us.
all
The
right.
railroad line traveled right behind our backyard.
Well, I don't get a chance to interview many of my neighbors, so welcome to the neighborhood. Hey, I've got a question for you, and this is funny. I think, and I'll share this with our guests because um, we are as close as six other people in our lifetime. And I remember when I was trying to find myself, I actually thought I was going to be a monk, but I realized after a week I couldn't keep my mouth shut. So, how did you end up in a convent?
I am an introvert. I love my quiet time. So you can think, how on earth did you do that with 12 brothers and sisters? But I would go off on my bicycle in the Philadelphia area or run back Tookonie and write poetry and spend a lot of time by myself. So I also went to Catholic schools. And so we did have mass and we did have the sisters. And that that quietness, that sense of stillness that you get in meditation was just very much a part of my life when I was very, very little. So it seemed to me just a natural thing to have happened. So I actually went to discernment days, they're called when you're thinking about going into a religious order. Luckily for a lot of people in the world, what they do now is give you psychologicals so that they can decide before you enter if you are in the right mindset for having your life be consecrated to God. And I did pass that whole section of psychologicals and was put in as a postulant and a novice, and that's 2 years, 3 years of formation. And then I lived out in the convents with the sisters. I did realize after just a few years that this probably wasn't for me. I didn't want to just leave impulsively, though, because I do have a very strong relationship with Jesus. I bring him into my life whenever I can. But what I found was after having a theology degree, and the more that I studied theology and lived it out in my very life, that there are a lot of things that I didn't agree with in the Catholic Church and also with a lot of established religions. It wasn't there's a lot of good they do, and I don't want to ever take anything of that away from them. But for somebody who already had a very strong relationship and knew how important it was to have God as the focal point of her life and in her decisions, I almost felt like I was giving that freedom away by following other people's way to pray, the way that they wanted you to act, the way that they wanted you to teach, the way that they wanted you. So I realized I was actually repressing a lot of my own individual beliefs. And the more that I studied theology, I realized what was going on, and I had to leave. But I had to stop listening to all my spiritual directors. My mother general cried the day that I went and talked to her. She was wonderful, and I do spell it all out in my book still, which I had published because I published it myself. But a lot of people were asking me about the religious aspect of my life, and so I kept it very clean and respectful in there. But if you read that book, you can see somebody struggling to really find truth in what they are doing, and then realizing that they were meant to go into the convent and that I was also meant to leave. So I'm not bitter. I don't think anything horrible about those experiences. In fact, they made me a deeper religious person that allows other people to be their own religious person. Almost like with yoga, like the namaste, like the God within me respects the God in you. So, yeah, so I actually wanted to write it all down. I journal every single day. I was listening to your podcast the other day, and journaling is so important for self-discovery, awareness, growth, development. And so I had all of those journals from all of those years. And so when I wrote my book, I was able to actually be there in that age. So a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, all that stuff that happened to you. And I'm like, well, remember, I was reading what I wrote back then. And so I was able to keep that point of view from a young 20-something-year-old going through all of the things that I went through. So a lot of people read it, and a lot of people will see me afterwards or just say, wow, I can really relate to the struggles that you had. So that's why I wrote that. And the flip side of that book is when I came out, I ended up dating again, and I got married, and my first child was stillborn. His name was Benjamin, so the book is dedicated to him. And I was a grief facilitator for Unite for years because they really saved me from going down a very dark road. So that was the other aspect I wanted to put out in that book, that struggle, that there's 20,000 stillbirths a year in this country. We have the highest rate of stillbirths in all developed countries. And by talking to the other moms and dads who went through it and facilitating their grief, it was really important for me to add that aspect and the spiritual side of that to the book.
Um, Geraldine, it's amazing, and I wish that we had this conversation early on. and I had learned this information about you because I got to bring you back in order to talk about still in general
Yeah.
in depth instead of what we're going to focus on. We'll ask you, where's your book available at?
Yes.
Still, I like that title.
Yeah, and the first line is the "Be still and know that I am God," because all through all of those experiences, it was always coming back and stilling myself and being aware of that goodness that's inside me that helped me make all those decisions. So that's why I called it Still. And of course, Benjamin was stillborn. So you can go to my website, which is www.geraldine, Geraldine, Donaher, Donaher.com, or you can go to Amazon.com and you would just type in Still, Still, and my name, Geraldine Donaher. And I
All
have it
right.
in Kindle and I also have it in paperback now.
And why don't you have it on Audible?
I will have to do that next.
You know something? I talk about that all the time with authors, and authors realize that, and authors don't realize is that 50% of their market, when they're marketing their book, most people listen to books on tape versus readers. For some reason, people don't read that much. And just from knowing your story, it's a page turner. And ladies and gentlemen, I would strongly suggest that you read this. Now, when we originally had this conversation, I do an icebreaker phone call with all of my guests because I don't like interviewing strangers. And I become very close to you. The subject matter that we're going to talk about is a very sensitive subject. It's a conversation that most people don't want to admit or don't want to have because it doesn't affect them directly. But I will tell you from my research, I did 6 episodes on human sex trafficking, and I know what that world feels like indirectly because the closer you get to the fire, all of a sudden the fire starts to reach out to you. In the event that any of this information that we pass on to you becomes personal, becomes a trigger, I'm going to ask you if you're experiencing this to reach out for help. The resources and the information that we're going to give you will give you an out. If you have family and friends that when we point out triggers or signs, I'm going to ask you to reach out and help someone that can't help themselves to ask. I know what it's like to get that phone call that tells me that I am getting too close and ask, do I really want to continue down this path? And whoever had called me before, I'm going to expect another phone call because I am not going to stop. Because even though we have adults that are being trafficked, it's easier because of our cell phones and technology to develop relationships and traffic our kids. And so, with that said, um, Geraldine, I hope you understand the risk you're taking by having this conversation. And first, I'm going to ask you, when did you start researching domestic sex trafficking of minors?
About 6 years ago, I was reading the Philadelphia Inquirer, and there was an article on there about a woman who was about 35 years old, and I did not save the article, but I hear her voice all of the time. The interviewer asked her why she didn't leave her trafficker because she stayed with him since she was 17. And she had said that she would be out on the Philadelphia corners and she would watch all the women walk past her. And they were so busy and they were on their way and they never even looked at her. And she almost wanted to scream out to them, but she didn't feel worthy of the conversation. So a lot of times I would think back of that interview. It was just a written word in the newspaper, and I just really felt for her, like what made me different from this person that just wanted to be acknowledged. And she had said in the interview, I didn't know how to get from where I was to where they were. And it didn't even seem like they cared that I had no idea how to do that. So she said she felt stuck, and so she just stayed. She didn't think she was worthy of another option or that she was worthy to be acknowledged. And even though when I left the convent and I started having my own children and I supported my husband and then I went back to teaching, I am a teacher and a writer, so I call myself a storyteller. But I I never forgot that article, that written word. And so 6 years ago, I just decided to start doing my own research. Nobody knew what I was talking about. They were like, oh, come on, that doesn't happen. And so I went to Polaris, I went to the missing and exploited children. There's so much information out there, nobody knows about it. So then I read an article where the average age of girls introduced to sex trafficking is between 12 and 14. And I taught in an elementary school. That's the seventh and eighth graders. The seventh and eighth graders are first introduced to trafficking. And then I started looking at my job in a whole different way. And 45% of them know their trafficker. And that's of the ones that they actually keep data on. So, sex trafficking of minors is a dark, dark world. So, most people don't even say anything about it. So, the FBI knows that they don't have all of the numbers on it. The 45% is probably higher than that. So, I just really wanted to get the information out there because nobody wants to talk about it. And I feel just like that one woman in the article, they should be acknowledged. They are so marginalized. Nobody wants to even see that.
Wow. I'm going to pause for 1 second and just think. Give me a second. So I know when I did my research, I I discovered conversations and people that were involved, and especially I had this thought with recent current events that there were names that were given to me that I couldn't name on air because I couldn't substantiate the claims. But there were people in very high positions that were involved in this world: government officials, entertainers, um, local people that were running organizations that involved children, that their names were on these lists. Um, so this conversation is going to be sensitive to many and be ignored by many more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, why write a book on this? And do you think that this subject or this conversation be warranted a publication?
So, because I taught for over 20 years and have been around children of this age, I realized storytelling is the best way to show them what this type of abuse looks like. When I did my research, I started looking into political leaders to find out what are they doing in their own states to try to help solve this problem. A lot of them don't do anything, but there are some who are saying that the children should be aware of what this abuse looks like. It's very difficult. It's manipulative, it's exploitive, it's coercive. And like I said, it's usually done by people they should be trusting, but they're not aware. Why aren't they aware? Well, sometimes it's because the people in the house are doing the manipulation. But if they were to read a book and they were able to see through the eyes of my main character when her friend is being trafficked, what that looks like, then they're a step away. The reader is a step away from what everything is going on, and so they're in a safe position. So my first degree is English literature, right? So that's how most people learn through storytelling, especially these younger ages. When I tried to go and get it published, when I went up to New York and I was talking to men in film and agents, and they literally laughed at me. One of them laughed and told me that I am so depressing him. So, what do you do with that? What do you do when somebody thinks that all of your research is just garbage, right? So, I'm like, okay, I'm not getting answers here. One of the guys in film actually said to me, nobody will care about your book until you change your protagonist into a superhero and she kills all of the sex traffickers in her community. So I said to him, wouldn't that be exploiting them all over again? And he didn't even answer me. So then I also had 6 women that I was pitching my story to. They didn't laugh. They asked me a lot of questions, a whole lot of questions, and I was on it. I was just answering their questions back. 3 of them asked to see my work. So I sent it to them. And within 2 months, I got the rejection letter saying, this needs to be told. You do all your research. It's well written, but it's not for me. And so I will self-publish this book if I have to. I'm fine with that. I went and got an editor. I paid him, and best money that I ever did, because I felt like it tightened up the story and it kept me true to the grammar and the development of the story characters, along with all of my facts. So I feel like it's a true story, it's fiction, but it's realistic fiction. And when adults, parents want to read it first, I'm all for it. I asked quite a few beta readers. Beta readers are people you send your work to and to get their honest feedback. I gave it to parents. They loved it. They said, no, this is not too violent or crass for my children. And then I gave it to quite a few teenagers and a few survivors. And I had great conversations with each of them. One of the survivors from Covenant House in Kensington said to me, nobody tells our story. It's all like Sound of Freedom, where like the people are being thrown into vans and taken across state lines. But that's not what really happens most of the time in the United States. So I gave the novel to Sister Megan Patterson at Dawn's Place, and she gave me a great quote afterwards saying that this is the most realistic depiction of domestic sex trafficking in the United States that she has ever come across. And so with all of that feedback, I just want to get the story out there, because if you are in denial of what's going on, nothing can be solved. If you know what's going on, and maybe some girls, I write it from a girl's point of view because I'm a woman, it happens to boys too. A boy will have to write that story. Then you can prepare yourself. If you see something coming at you, you can duck, or you can get out before it gets too involved. Too many of them are targeted, and then they're trapped.
Yeah. And many times stories like this never get told. It's because of fear. It's because of personal involvement. It's because of not believing that this is going to be the truth. And then the other is not believing it can happen to you until it actually happens to you. I know with my life experiences, I had many years that I knew background or backroom conversations about Epstein. And when it finally came to surface, I knew about this 25 years ago, as well as current conversations because of my relationships with different people of a current entertainer that is now being incarcerated with stories that are being told or allegations. So I won't mention his name because we don't know these to be fact until he's actually proven. But I also know that, we have a current system that's involved that is rewinding life as it is to go back in time, a system that's in place that deviant behavior is now acceptable. And so conversations like this in your book will get buried because now they want to control what can be read and what can't be read. And what's happening with our literature is that we're going away from the truth, and we want to sensationalize the life we have here for profit. And these stories are protecting our children. Before I ask you to go into the development and give us a little bit about the book, the novel, YA, and where that title came from, I want to talk about some of the signs and the behaviors, because a lot of people are very good at grooming these young kids, and it's become very convenient through technology in order to have access to these kids. Because even though they don't have a personal face to face conversation with them, they get groomed by the internet, by apps, and so forth. So, kind of set it up for us and what we should be looking for as friends, family, parents, educators, and neighbors.
So there are three different types of sex traffickers out there. One of them would be referred to as the guerrilla sex traffickers. So they're the angry ones. They're the ones that are using force. They are the ones that will take somebody and throw them into the van and do it violently. But most of them are very patient, highly intelligent, and very charming. So what happens is a lot of these younger, and once again, I'm referring to girls on here, but this does happen to boys. Most of the girls often end up falling in love with these charmers. They're also called Romeos, and they think they're doing things for their boyfriend. Their boyfriend will talk them into doing things. I interviewed Gina Jernukian. She's the founder of Soul Survivor Inc., and she does an excellent job of explaining these types of sex traffickers and how girls are very slowly, it's called stretching boundaries, are taken into their sex trafficked world because they end up feeling like they owe something back to this boyfriend. Well, he did do all of this for me. He's only asking for this little one. He loves me. If he didn't really have my best interest, because they're so young, right? So usually your young people want to be independent, they want to make their own decisions, and this person has been grooming them or talking them into doing what they want for months. It might take months, but they are very patient. They always stay under the radar. Gina had said she knows some of these types of sex traffickers are actually introduced to the parents. And then the parents are totally charmed by this person and will allow their child to go with them. And then all of a sudden, the preteen or the teen starts to get isolated by this person. They will start lying. They will say things like, oh my gosh, your parents, they're such a pain in the you know what. They don't even want you around. They called me. They were like, just keep her. So then they slowly start brainwashing the young people. So if anybody is spending a lot of time online, like you're saying, online is the best way, right? Because they can start working that manipulation, that exploiting them before they even meet them. So then the young person has all of these great ideas in their head. I'm going to become a movie star. They're going to back me in my music. So before they even meet them, they're already having all of this emotional ties to this human. And then you have parents in the house who are trying to make you to go to bed on time or telling you can't go to a party. And these sex traffickers know that at this age they want to be independent. So then they also foster that. Oh, come on, you're not still looking at what your parents are going to say, are you? So they use all these things. They're very smart. And my book, when I had mentioned to you that it's YA, that means it's young adult. The title of my story is Mouth Shut, Head Down, because I realized that in all what's going on, even what you see on TV these days, I wanted to know, why aren't the friends of these preteens and teens saying anything? What are they doing? Why are they keeping their mouths shut? Why are they keeping their heads down? And then once they're trafficked, why are they continuing that? So the title of my second story is Mouth Shut, Head Down, and it is YA, which means it would be appropriate for 12, 13-year olds and up.
All right. So, can we answer that question? Why are the friends not saying it or mention it or pointing it out? Why is that?
Because of the peer pressure and the loyalty. So you'll, like in my story, Mouth Shut, Head Down, my protagonist is Allie. She is not sex trafficked. I have never been sex trafficked, so I did not feel safe writing the point of view of my character from somebody who went through that. But I feel like everybody that I interviewed and researched and read about, I really care about as a friend. So in my story, Tanaya is Allie's best friend, and Allie watches Tanaya get more and more involved with this older gentleman in her community, and then she becomes sex trafficked. And then the reader is experiencing it all through Allie, and Allie isn't saying anything. So then you start realizing, why isn't Allie saying anything? Well, because my best friend told me not to tell her mom. Well, my best friend always told me to do these things, and if I wanted my best friend to do this and I asked her not to tell my mom, I wouldn't tell, you know? So there's a strong loyalty among that age, that adolescence. And I don't think this would have rang true to me if I didn't spend over 20 years in elementary schools with 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. They have that very strong, tight relationship. So they need to read about it. They need to read about it to say, oh, so this is what's happening to them, because a lot of times they don't want to believe it. Nobody's telling them that this is something this person could actually be doing.
Now, let me ask you this question, because when you hear sex trafficking, you think of the movie Taken, that they're actually, drug in a van, and I've seen this on the streets of New York, and it's hard to witness because you doubt that you've actually seen what you just saw. I saw a van pull up at a corner, and guys grab an individual and then spell out from traffic. And all of a sudden, you have 11 witnesses out there and 11 different interpretations of what they saw, because it all happened so quick. And I know in my mind, you doubt if, New York, it's just a Hollywood movie, it's a camera someplace. And by the time you realize that it's real. So these young ladies, I'm going to ask, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about teen sex trafficking? Are these kids being abducted, or are they being manipulated while still living at home until they can be abducted? And what exactly, when we talk about sex trafficking, are they being trafficked for multiple sexual relationships, or are they being trafficked for porn movies or whatever? I just need a definition so we understand what we're talking about.
So domestic sex trafficking is the trade of commercial sexual act for anything of value. So that value could be food, money, drugs, protection. It could even be the imbalance of power in a relationship, right? So they think, oh, this person loves me, I'm going to do whatever they do. So that's a value to a lot of these young kids. So what happens domestic is it's in the community. So most of the time, it's not going to be dragging them into a van and taking them away. You're right, that does happen. But it's most of the time, it's kids going to school, sometimes being trafficked after school and at nighttime by their boyfriend or a parent, especially if that parent has addictions, then going to school the next day, because your sex traffickers are very intelligent. And if they abducted that person, there's a red flag, and then the police are on them. If they manipulate the person to believe that they are helping them before they're trafficked, then there's no, oh, they're a runaway. And what do police do with runaway? In the past, they hardly did anything. But now there is a movement that about 2 million youths, preteens and teens, are either runaways or throwaways in this country a year. 1 out of every 6 are going to be sex trafficked. That's like 334,000 teens a year that are going to be selling themselves out in order to be protected on the street. Because you could be raped by a gang on a Friday night because you have nowhere to sleep because you ran away or your parents threw you out of the house. Or this sex trafficker who's charming will find you and say, hey, you look a little hungry. Are you okay? And you might say, I'm scared. Well, why don't you come with me? I have a house. You can sleep there. And then they start just grooming them in a nice, charming, wonderful way. I think you're beautiful. I love you. And then all of a sudden they'll say, you know what? I don't have enough money for the electric bill this week. I was wondering if you would do this for me, and then we can put the money for that. That's how it most of the time happens in this country.
Well, I also know, and this is the information that I uncovered, is that the foster system, all right, 75% of those young men and women that turned of 18 and they are freed from the foster system are turned out on the streets, that 75% of them turn out to be homeless. They don't have access to college. They don't have access to a roof over their head. They're in shelters, and these people are preying on these people. What resources, if you believe that someone is being trafficked or in harm's way, I need to know, who should we contact? And in the event that we are active in saving someone, are we at risk in the event that what we think we see may not exactly be that? And because everyone's worried about being sued. So that's the reason why people don't get involved.
Right. So it's really difficult. They're marginalized for a reason, right? So one, a lot of people don't want to get behind it. Two, people are afraid of it. And three, people question themselves. That absolutely can't be happening. If we're just more aware, and I always am amazed at the airport system and the bus SEPTA, good old Southeastern Pennsylvania transportation, with all of their, this is what it looks like if you're being trafficked. And if you see someone say something, you can always contact 911. Most of the time, they're not going to do anything right away unless, of course, they see that something's going on. But every time there's a phone call put in, it is drawing more attention and it is helping. I found that I really like getting in contact and donating things to the people who know what they're doing. So, who is that? Polaris Project is amazing. The Missing and Exploited Children, the National, they do amazing work. And you can volunteer. You can be somebody who just answers phone and talks to somebody while they think they're going to be trafficked and they're afraid, or they're on the street corner and they don't know what to do. They can, most everybody has phones these days, so they have access to call people. You can volunteer time on that. Covenant House and Dawn's Place and Soul Survivor Inc. are people that I would give my money to because they are professionals who know how to get help to these kids. There is in 2025, Gina had told me that STEP, STEP .how, HOW, is an app that she developed with survivors, and she's trying to make it go national. And anybody with a phone will be able to have this downloaded onto their phone. And as soon as they push their button, they have within a 100-mile radius any help that they can get. So you could even be the person contacting Step How and say, I see somebody and it looks like they're being abducted. What do I do? And then the person on Step How will be like, these are the places that you can call, or we're already sending somebody there. So that's supposed to be coming out in 2025. So that to me is like one of the most important things that's going to happen because everybody has a phone.
Right. I had a young lady on my I interviewed. We talked about entrepreneurs. She has a product. It's called Find Me Now. It's a piece of jewelry. Basically, in the event that you are abducted, lost, trapped, or whatever the case may be, press the button and you have 10 contacts inside that contact, and it will actually give you their last location. It looks like jewelry. I'm not going to give out any more information other than the website is findmenow.com. Is one of those things. I'm going to ask you, in research, you've written a book, YA, young adults, in your research. I know it's kind of hard when you are talking to someone or speaking with someone that has experienced some things that are uncommon to our everyday life. Did you ever come across a conversation or a story that you couldn't unsee or wish you had never heard?
I I always feel like the stories that people are telling me, even though they are, I hope this comes out right, even though they're gut wrenching, they tend to take on a sacredness for me, like that they allowed me in to see that story and to tell me a little bit about themselves. And it's almost as if it's that sacredness there. I don't know if it's because I went through so much things in my own life, but it was almost like we're all carry something that could be devastating. And then once you share that with somebody, it makes it less poignant. Like it's almost like you have a sharedness there, a humanness. So I am thinking that it's more of the stories that I don't know. I feel like the stories that I do know are people who are getting the help that they needed because they're talking. What bothers me the most, Kevin, is that the people that aren't talking because they don't have anybody to talk to and they are stuck in this world and they feel so alone and they're being abused and they're being asked to do things that they don't want to do. Those are the things that keep me up at night and make me worried because I know there are so many kids out there that are having things done to them and they're so trapped and they don't know how to get. So I think it's the not knowing the stories that are the worst for me personally because I just there are the stories that people have told me, we're on the other end of them and they are healing and they're telling their stories and I'm like, that was horrible. I'm so glad you're safe. The stories that we don't know are what scare me, actually.
Oh, it's always, what they say that the truth is in the lies that we tell. And sometimes the stories are the lies that we actually tell before the truth ever gets told.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you sharing this. I can't wait to read YA. Um, I'm going to do my best and my power to find you someone that will take the words that you have finally researched and put pen to paper to turn into this novel that will help other people. And I'm pretty sure that inside the book you have listed resources and places you can contact. If you don't mind, just for the sake of doing this, in the event that there's anyone that thinks they've been trafficked, had a relative that's being trafficked or assumed to be trafficked, or someone's crying out for help that's being groomed by someone and they want to confirm that this relationship, when it feels uncomfortable, it may be just you're being groomed for something else. Is there someone? But sometimes we can't talk to our parents, and sometimes we can't talk to our friends because we're afraid of being judged, especially with this type of conversation. Who should they contact?
So the school counselors, I know they always get a bad rap in the high schools, but if you go and you talk to somebody at your school, a lot of times it might be a teacher that you can trust. I will say that that's a pretty good end if you're still in school. But on my website, GeraldineDonaher.com, I do have resources for people, and some of them are online. A lot of them, even Polaris Project, you can call them and you will get a human being to talk to you just to calm you down, let you know what you need to know, and it's all anonymous. You don't have to tell them where you're even calling from. So I also did a blog on what what it looks like if you're agreeing to sexual acts and when you don't agree to sexual acts. Because I know this is going to be a touchy subject matter, but a lot of times the sex trafficker will say, well, you liked it because of different ways that their body was reacting. I actually wrote a great blog on how a sneeze is a body reacting and you can't stop that. So just because it seems like you are enjoying whatever the sex trafficker is asking you to do, it doesn't mean you have given them consent. So I do think that by going to my website, I do not collect any information on anybody who clicks on my website. There's just free information on there so that people can click on like bicycle health, addiction.com, different health things. I have a whole lot of them listed there so they can go and just play around with the different websites, get enough information as they can, and then make their own decisions. It's all options. If you have options, then you are not stuck.
All right. You have options. You are not stuck. Ms. Geraldine, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being a guest. I also want to thank you for putting yourself out there because this conversation is sensitive to some. It's a threat to many that are involved in this world. I am not going to stop telling these type of stories because I know these stories are making a difference in someone's life. And if we can save one child, we saved 1,000 children from this. And if you're a parent, a friend, a coach, a teacher, a fitness professional, a dance instructor, you name it, if you're involved in someone's life that is a minor, this conversation is real. Is a conversation that needs to be had. Please pay attention. Ask uncomfortable questions because they lead to uncomfortable answers. But it's a lot better to be uncomfortable than be on the lookout of trying to find someone that didn't come home that night or someone that gets overwhelmed with their life as it is and they decide to take their life. And the reality of this is real in this type of conversation. I appreciate you bringing this to light. I appreciate you writing this book and putting yourself out there. And again, like I said, there will be some that will question and try to devalue the conversation that you're about to have. But I would say, just like your character in your book, resilience is key. Is there anything that you want to leave with our listeners before we sign off?
You are not alone and you do have options. So never feel like there isn't anybody out there who can help you and can point you in the right direction. We're here, and even if it's just reaching out to me, and then I can help you.
All right. And how do we get in touch with you again?
GeraldineDonaher.com, GeraldineDonaher.
All right. I'm going to ask you this because I have a list of 100 people and their secrets to a successful life. We're not talking about your bank account, but these are people that are making a difference. If I were to ask you, I'm going to ask you two questions. If you were to list the key factors that give you the life that you have, your secrets that you like to pass on someone else, I would like you to list. It could be one, it could be many. I know when I was asked this question, I came up with 10, and I found out that one, I came up with 12. And one of the 12, I realized I was teaching, but I wasn't practicing. So I was not as authentic with my own behavior as I was holding other people accountable. The other thing I'm going to ask you, and I've asked this several times. I've been on air going into my 4th year, and I've asked this question. If you had one ask, ASK, that means if you had one dream or one wish that could come true, what will it be? And let me preface it this way. And the reason why I'm saying it this way is because I've had 6 people that have been guests on my show. I've always said, and you've probably seen a text that I wrote this morning, and I said, if you have 9 broken people that are in your circle, you are the 10th. And I had one person get upset because they hung on the word that said broke, and I said, based on interpretation and perspective, broke could be many things. I'm not talking about your financial position. Sometimes emotionally we are broke. But my circle of friends are not people that drive by an accident, they stop and help. And when I said I have 6 total strangers that have answered this question that I'm about to ask you, that their lives have been changed because someone found something that was so compelling in their story that it reached out and helped. The guy made a wrong that was right. An individual that was finished the Boston Marathon but was not granted the prize money. $75,000 went to that person that 10 years later had never received the prize money. That's the power. There's a $50,000 grant that was given by the Wells Foundation to 2 of my guests that had created They're educators in the Bronx school system, and I can go on with the other six. And I just happen to showcase those two individuals because I have had their permission to mention their name. So let me ask you your ask first. So if you had one ask, what would that be, Geraldine?
Hmm. I would like to know how I can show people that they have autonomy, mind, body, and soul. When so many people around them are taking that away, I would love to figure out how to have each individual know that their freedom lies within their minds, their bodies, and their souls. And I can only figure out how to get this information to them to allow them to be empowered by that by themselves through storytelling. And I just feel like I keep hitting a wall on it, but I will keep pushing that.
All right. Based on interpretation, I think you're asking people to share your story in your next book.
And to
And your
support each other on allowing other people to be true to their own truths, their own autonomy. Like, don't be popping people down. We need to lift each other up.
all right, let's bring the communities together. So, what are your secrets to your success?
Reaching out, never giving up, hit the ground running.
All right. And with that said, I want to thank you. I want to thank my listeners. And this is my mindset. To grow, you must make some mistakes. To have confidence, you must address your anxieties. To forgive yourself, you must hold you accountable. To learn, you must make some mistakes and you have to unlearn some stuff. And to exist, you must show up more today than you did tomorrow. Understand the power of your words. These are notes from your mindset messenger, Kevin Macklemore. We have covered a lot of information, and I hope at some point this conversation has touched you and has nudged you a little bit to take action and get involved in someone's life. If you like this episode, go to RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page, and you can like it or share it and make comments. If you want to follow us, go ahead and subscribe. We would welcome you. But remember, I only want people to subscribe that have a high call to action. Like I said, my group of friends, as well as my subscribers, they don't drive by an accident. They stop to help. And if you'd like to be a guest, and Miss Geraldine, I'm going to ask you because I would love to talk about Still and bring you back as a guest to talk about that book a little bit more. And in the event that we get a chance that your book is published, we'd like to go ahead and talk about and go do a deeper dive into your protagonist and antagonist within that story, and then talk about and promote the book. So if you would honor us so much when you're ready, that please come back. And to our listeners, if you have a person that has a story that needs to be told, we are the everyday person's hero, and that's our platform, providing hope, helping other people every single day. My grandfather always said, when you get to a point that you can help someone, it is your duty to do so. And he said, reach one, teach one. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we will fade to black, and we are out. Thank you, Geraldine.
Thank you, Kevin.